Hello everyone, this is Neha Tulsyan from Crescent Creation. Welcome to another video on my YouTube channel. Today's video is part of my MFT Pure Innocence Card series. And for this month, I'm using the two new Pure Innocence stamps called the Goal Getter and the Champ. And I've created these two mini slimline cards using these two stamp sets, along with few more products from My Favorite Things. So here I have the Let's Connect dynamics from My Favorite Things. And before I start showing you how I created my card, here I'm just showing you how I store my dies. I don't use any special pockets but the same packaging that comes with the dies. So here I'm just trimming off the inside packaging a little bit from both sides. This just helps me to take the dies in and out easily from the clear bag. And now I'm using these 2x3 magnet sheets that I got from Amazon. These are self-adhesive sheets and I'm using 1.5 of these sheet for this particular die set. Now once the magnets are in place, I can just go ahead and put my dies in place and then store this in the clear packaging that it came with. Now let's do some die cutting. So here I'm using some scrap cardstock in white, black and gray color to die cut from the Let's Connect dynamics, and I'm going to use the white die cut that's going to be the screen for my computer, and stamp a teacher image from the stamp set Virtually the Best. I'm using my MISTI tool to help me stamp the image, and here I used my thumb to condition my new stamp set, and now I'm stamping it using a black ink. Stamped it twice to get a crisp image, and now I'm going to go ahead and stamp Great Job onto the speech bubble that I just die cut using white cardstock. This sentiment is from the stamp set Goal Getter, and it's long and it wouldn't have fit my speech bubble, so I did some stamp surgery here. So my great and job are in two different lines and it fits perfectly into my speech bubble. The speech bubble is from the Let's Connect dynamics. Next, I'm going to go ahead and stamp both the girl and boy image from the PI stamps Goal Getter and Champ. I'm using a Copic friendly black ink to stamp these images, as I'm going to use my Copic markers to color these images. So here I'm starting with coloring the boy image. I'm using some cool gray markers to color the hair of the boy. I'm starting with my C9 marker and I'm adding shadows wherever needed. Then I'm coming in with my C7 and just blending those shadows. You don't want to blend the colors too much, but just lightly put on the ink. And next I'm using my C5 marker and blending everything out. Then I'm coming in with my darkest color, which is the C10, and adding some darker shadows. And I'm not going to blend this anymore because I don't want to lose those nice hair streaks that I have just created. Next I'm using some B markers to color his pants. I'm using B16 as my darker marker here, adding shadows to few of the areas including the knees. Then using B14 to blend the B16 marker. And lastly coming in with B12 and blending everything out. I know that I'm going to go ahead and add a second layer of color, so when I added B12, I left a lot of white spaces. So here I'm coming back with all my colors, starting with B16, then B14, and then lastly with B12. And this time I'm going to go ahead and fill in the complete image with B12, giving me a nice highlight area on that pair of pants. To color his skin, I'm using some E markers. I'm using E15 as my darker marker and adding shadows all around his face and hand. Next I'm using E13 and blending those shadows. Adding a little bit of blush to his cheeks using R83 marker. Then coming in with E11 and blending the E13 and the blush. And lastly coming with E01 and blending everything out. Here I'm going to go ahead and add a second layer to the skin. And I'm not going to share the whole footage of that because I just did the same as I did for the first layer. Next I'm going to go ahead and color his shoes. I'm using some cool gray markers here. I used C7 as my darker marker for the shoes and blended that using C5. For the shirt, I'm using a very different blend that I haven't used before. I recently got these markers and I thought that they work very well together. So here I have my first marker, which is the YG01 marker, and here I'm adding the shadows using it. Next I'm using the YG00 marker and blending that YG01. And lastly, I'm using Y000 as my lightest color and blending everything out. Here I'm adding a second layer of color, going back with my darkest, then medium and the lightest. I really like this color combo. It gives you a very subtle yellowish green color, almost fluorescent. And if you want to add a little more green to this, take it a little more towards the greener side. You can use YG23 and add shadows using it, as I'm gonna do next here. I just wanted to add a little bit more green to this shirt. So here I'm adding YG23 on the darker areas of the shirt. I'm using it very lightly, barely touching the marker to my cardstock, and that will add that right amount of green that I wanted on the shirt. And next I'm going to go ahead and blend that out using my YG01. To color the trophy here, I'm using some YR markers. I'm using YR24 as my darker marker here. Next, using YR23 as my medium shade and blending YR24. And lastly, coming in with YR21 and blending everything out. I added a second layer of color going from dark to the light marker. Then I used my Spectrum Noir glitter pen in clear color to add some shine to the trophy. Now let's go ahead and color our girl here. I'm starting with the hair. I'm using E49 as my darker marker here. Then coming in with E79 Copic marker as my medium shade, and lastly coming in with E74 and blending everything out. Going back with my E49 marker and just making those shadows a little more darker. And then coming in with my lightest color, that's E74, and blending everything out. For the girl's skin, I'm using E13 as my darker marker. I wanted to color the girl a little bit lighter than the boy, so I did not use the darkest color that I used for the boy. Instead, I used the second darkest color, which is the E13, as the darkest color for my girl. So I used E13, E11, E01 and E00 marker for the skin of the girl, including the R83 for the blush for her cheeks. Here I'm going ahead and adding a second layer of color to her skin. Again, repeating the same steps, going from the darkest marker to my lightest marker and getting a good seamless blend. Now coloring the skirt of the girl, I'm using RV69 as my darkest marker. To add some interest to the skirt, I'm adding some streaks in the darkest color to create those natural folds on a skirt. Then I'm coming in with my medium color, that's RV34, and blending those darker colors. And lastly coming in with RV52 as my lightest color and blending everything out. There is a little big gap between my darkest color and my medium color, so it was a little difficult to blend them together, but going over the darker marker with the medium marker a few times just helps blend the colors better. Next, I use the same colors to color the shoes of the girl. Off camera, I also colored the metal part of the medal using the same YR markers as I used for the trophy. For her shirt, I'm using some toner gray markers. I'm using T5 as my darker color, then blending that out using T2, and lastly coming in with my T0 marker and blending everything out. Off camera, I added a second layer of color. For her jacket, I'm using some BG markers. I'm using BG15 as my darker marker here, blending that out using BG11. And lastly coming in with my lightest color, that's BG10, and blending everything out. Again, added a second layer of color off camera. Next, I used the same BG markers and the toner gray markers to color the girl's leggings. To color the strap of the medal, I'm using V04 and V01 Copic marker. Next, I'm using my black jelly roll pen to add back the eyes and mouth on both the images. And also, I'm using my white gel pen to add highlights to both the images. Now, let's go ahead and color the teacher image that's going to go on our computer. I'm using E49 and E77 marker for her hair. Since this image is small, I used only two colors to color her hair. Next, I'm using the same YG markers to color her dress that I used for the boy's shirt. For her skin, I'm using E11 as my darker marker, using E01 as my medium shade, and lastly using E00 as my lightest marker and blending everything out. Added some blush to her cheeks using R20 marker, and then came in with RV34 to color her lips. Then I'm using the YR markers to color her jacket. It's the same YR markers that I used to color the trophy. I tried to use similar colors as I used for coloring the boy to balance the colors all over a card. Here I'm using some toner gray markers to color her headset. Lastly, coming in with my black and white gel pens and adding details to this image. I did not want to leave the computer screen completely white, so here I'm using BG10 and adding some color to the screen and also to the gray chalk speech bubble. Now I'm going to go ahead and assemble the computer using some liquid glue to glue the front screen to the back of the computer. Added some foam tape behind the speech bubble and adding that to the screen. Here I'm going to go ahead and assemble the rest of the computer. Next, for my card front, I have this pattern paper that I have trimmed to 3 by 6 inches. I'm adhering a second pattern paper on top of it that measures 3 by 2 inches. And this is what creates the floor for my scene. Next, adding the white strip of cardstock to create the baseboard. Next, gluing this wooden paper from my stash to create the table for my computer. And now gluing the computer directly to that table. And before I glue anything else, I'll first go ahead and stamp the sentiment. The sentiment reads, "Teachers can do virtually anything." From the stamp set, "Virtually the best." Next, I've added some double-sided foam tape behind the boy image, removing the backing, and I'll go ahead and glue this to my card front. Using C2 marker and adding a little bit of shading just below the boy to make sure it looks like he's standing, not floating in air. Next, I'm adding this card front to a black card base that measures 3¼ by 6¼ inches. And I'm gluing a 3 by 6 inch white cardstock to the inside of my card for me to have some space to write some message to the recipient. And that's it, my card is ready. Similarly, I prepared this other card with the girl image on it. The only difference is I used a different teacher image from the Virtually the Best stamp set. And also, I used a silver mirror cardstock instead of the grey cardstock for the computer. So these were my 2 mini slimline cards for today. My first video of the month May of the Pure Innocence Card series from My Favorite Things. The next video is coming on May 31st, so stay tuned and don't forget to give this video a thumbs up and subscribe to my channel if you haven't already. Here are 2 more videos from my last month's Pure Innocence series. Thank you for visiting. Have a nice day.